as a whole will have voted to remain in the European Union, I hope, and would campaign for that. And then, a year later, the Scots have their second referendum. And I'm hoping that we would be able to persuade them to stay in the UK by implementing written constitution, etc. But, it's touch and go. It's very, very probably not. So we just have to accept that. And since the UK would be remaining in the EU, the departure wouldn't be traumatic. It would be like Czechoslovakia splitting up into two countries. Because they're both in the EU, everyone's happy. So, as part of the Remain Alliance, I'm proposing also that there be a national referendum on nuclear weapons. Scotland has said, and in an independent Scotland run by the SNP, it would be implemented, that all nuclear weapons have to leave Scotland. That's just a fact. And it's one of the reasons that I would be very tempted to vote for independence in a second referendum in Scotland. As a peace activist, it's logical. I hoped when I voted to keep the UK together that we could persuade the UK establishment to get serious about disarmament. The Lib Dems have a great policy on disarmament. Theoretically, they're pledged to, going for it internationally, multilaterally. But in reality, Jo Swinson says, no, she's happy to press the button. I mean, no, I'm sorry, folks. Take the button away from these crazy politicians. So that means post-independence Scotland would get rid of nuclear weapons. Does the rest of the UK want them? I don't think so. I don't think I want them in Wales, nor England. I love England. I don't really want them anywhere. Sweden doesn't have them, and they're quite a nice society. Switzerland doesn't have them. They get on. Norway doesn't have them. They're quite wealthy. Germany doesn't have them. They do all right. So why do we need them? We don't, folks. And I'm suggesting that we have a UK-wide referendum whether we want nuclear weapons. I suspect the majority of the people would vote against them. If the majority of people in England say they want them, then they can go to England. Poor England. I just think they're antiquated. Today's wars are not about nuclear weapons. They're about information, disinformation, morale, cultural warfare, interreligious warfare. These are the wars we're facing. And I'm coming from a peace perspective. I want to be thinking about the next investment in peace technology and so on. So yes, a anti-nuclear weapons referendum. And then Britain should pioneer the international nuclear disarmament process. We'd be the first member of the Security Council to voluntarily divest ourselves of nuclear weapons. And we could organise multilateral conferences in Britain for all existing nuclear weapon members to join us. Think what the world could do to benefit from the denuclearisation of the planet. If we could persuade America, Russia, France, Israel, Pakistan, China to join us in a global denuclearisation of weapons, then I think we could change the energy. I lived through the Gorbachev-Thatcher talks, Reagan-Thatcher talks, and there was a tremendous boost of energy in 1990 when they all signed the Treaty of Paris and denuclearised. It was such a positive energy that came on the planet. After the 80s, Greenham Common, everyone was very worried about nuclear weapons. And then 1990, Treaty of Paris, we all felt, thank God, the leaders have bowed to the will of the Greenham Common marchers and all the sensible people. I'd set up Philosophers and Historians for Peace, so I was part of that movement in the 80s. But then what do we see? They've sneakily built up more nuclear weapons. They're now trying to get out of the agreement that was signed, the START agreements, that Thatcher and Reagan and Gorbachev signed. Gorbachev's jumping up and down in Russia saying, help, help, panic, red button, danger. We should listen to him. He's one of the wisest statesmen on the planet. We're only here because of Gorbachev, because he disarmed and signed those agreements. Thatcher's gone, Reagan's gone. Gorbachev is still around. We should listen to him. And we should ask him to help supervise that denuclearisation. And a reforming Britain could pioneer that. He's the kind of Russian we want to give British citizenship to, with all due respect. not these kind of rogue, oligarchs who've stolen all the gas money. So yes, so also I want an Institute of Peace as part of the Bremain Alliance. I pledged to the British people when I was appointed at the University of London to set up a National Centre for Peace. I'm delivering on that, folks. It looks like my country might be falling apart, but I'm still sticking to my mission. I feel like the guy on, I don't know, the burning deck here. The boy stood on the burning deck. Do you remember that poem? My mission is still to deliver a National Centre for Peace Thinking and Action and Research in London to help to shift this Titanic of the British state away from thinking about militarism all the time. The madness of our people that took us into Iraq in 2013, that took us, have started bombing Syria, under Theresa May, and have done their war fighting secretly, mostly with covert forces, and are doing propaganda warfare, like through the Institute of Statecraft in Fife. For God's sake, Scotland, these people are the Cold War warriors that are still trying to take on Russia. They don't realise they're like these Japanese people that are fighting on in the 1960s in the islands, that actually we now need to be thinking about peace. This is the discussion I had with Lawrence Friedman, Professor of War Studies, way back when, who said, no, peace is ridiculous, you can't study it, it doesn't exist, there's no such thing as peace. I do war studies, war's real, we study it, we get lots of money, we have lots of MOD types coming and funding us. Okay, I also want an Institute of Peace, thank you very much, Lawrence. and the British people deserve it. So an autonomous institute is mentioned as part of this project, like they have in Washington, DC, like they have in Stockholm, like they have in many intelligent places around the planet. We have to start thinking about peace as a culture and as a world. And if Scotland goes totally independent, then fine. Have one also in Edinburgh for Scotland. Otherwise, if the UK just holds together, then the main one could be in the capital with branches in Belfast and Edinburgh and Cardiff. Or Aberystwyth, actually. I prefer Aberystwyth. Give them something. I love that place. Okay, so anyway, the other part of the Bremain Manifesto is EU reform. Because, there are problems with the EU. I'm not saying the EU's perfect. But because I'm a kind of Thomas à Becket figure, I'm saying don't split up the church. Let's reform it from within. Let's use our intelligence as an island nation of proud, reforming characteristics to change what's wrong with the European Union. I think there needs to be more openness, more transparency. I think there should be truth-telling by all civil servants and bureaucrats, like freedom of information legislation. We need to get truth blowing through the halls of Strasbourg and Brussels. And if that's a problem, then, we know there's something wrong. Yes, there has been corruption, there has been stupid, silly behaviour, but now let's reform it. Let's get the, Erasmus energy. I mean, they invoke Erasmus as their educational guru. Well, Erasmus, like me, was a reformer within the system, but he was a truth teller. He said, let's retranslate this New Testament thing from Greek and let's see what it actually says. That's what we should be doing. And as part of that European Union reform, again, I come back to my point in the Bremain Manifesto, that we would pledge to a European Union mediation service. This would solve the problems like in Ukraine, which is a tragedy, and the problems in Spain, Catalan, and so on. Now, we need that. Then we need, above all, and these are all important, I'm not going to rank them, parliamentary veracity as a pledge by the Bremain Alliance, which is all MPs elected, I don't care who's elected to Parliament, as long as they've taken a veracity oath, they have to tell the truth in Parliament, and also Lords as well. And, as I'll come to it, all the Privy Council. So they have to swear an oath that if they are found to have lied, they resign immediately or they're sacked. Simple as that. Also, We also need an overhaul of our education system in the UK. As a teacher, I know, because I've taught for 10 years in the UK school system, and you know, the UK school system is failing our country because it's not teaching kids how to think, it's not teaching kids how to make joined up decisions, it's not teaching kids about morality. So we're turning out a bunch of kids who think power, status, sex, money, you know, is all good. And lies, if they get you there, that's fine, you can do that. So we're turning out a bunch of amoral kids, not immoral, but amoral. They literally haven't realised about ethics. Something's wrong there, you know, and that's what, you know, that's what we're facing as a crisis, as a nation. So in the Bremain lines, I'm saying more philosophy, more ethics, more RE teaching in the schools so that kids realise it's as important as mathematics. It is. To know the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, is as important as to know how to do advanced calculus or algebra or whatever. Those are great skills. I love maths. But much more important, actually, or at least equally important, is the calculus of right and wrong, the calculus of pleasure and pain, the calculus of ethics, of duty, of service, and of love, ultimately. So yes, so more as many periods a week for every kid in the country as they get science and maths for RE and philosophy and ethics. And, you know, I'm not just saying that because I'm an RE teacher, I'm saying that because that will save our nation. Right, then the other thing we need is gifted and talented programme in universities in the UK. Why do we need that? Well, we have a gifted and talented programme in schools, thank you. I've taught in schools where, you know, we're taught to spot out the really intelligent kids and bring them on, give them extra teaching and extra work and so on. We need our geniuses. I'm hoping that, you know, all the geniuses that listen to my talks, you realise how important you are. You know, we need our geniuses to come up with the inventions for cracking the problems that we have, be they social inventions or physical, chemical or mathematical or, you know, metaphysical inventions. We need new thinking, right? Now, our universities should be generating this, but they've become a sort of treadmill where people go for social status and kind of the sociology of peer recognition by mediocrities who just happen to be fairly wealthy. Gosh, you know, this is like lemmings slumbering towards the cliff, you know. Poor old Shelley got thrown out of Oxford. The guy was a genius. If my gifted and talented programme in universities was going, they would spot Shelley. They would say, blimey, this essay as why we have a duty to be atheists is brilliant. Give this guy extra homework. Make him read the classics of Christian theology and let him understand the subtle differences between atheism and agnosticism and skepticism and, you know, transcendental epoche and etc. You know, so yes, a gifted and talented programme for universities to harness the great souls that are being born into the UK, incarnating in, and to feed their minds. Like, these are indigo children. We should love them and nurture them, not let them drop out because our universities are run by mediocrities that persecute intelligence, which is kind of what happens, you know. I've seen it in action as a mediator in higher education disputes. We have mediocre academics who are happy doing their little boring moribund stuff and churning out the same old papers on AJR, etc., etc. And the genuine philosophers are forced to go and live in benders in Scotland, you know. Not acceptable, not acceptable. Gifted and talented scheme in universities is my antidote. I've mentioned the Green New Deal. As part of that, we need a total offshore of the banking and financial services industry. The regulation of all these cutthroat pirate banking schemes that are operating offshore in Cayman Islands and all the rest. They need to pay their taxes. The people that are banking and parking their money there, who are behind Brexit, need to be called to account by the British people, the Reforming Alliance. And if they threaten, well, we'll go and put our money elsewhere, we'll let them, you know. like we the British people can survive the exodus of the sharks who need sharks, you know. But I mean, if they want to play fair by the rules, then fine, they can become honourable citizens, and that industry needs reforming. Likewise with the NHS, so-called National Healing Service, National Health Service, I'm suggesting it be renamed the National Healing Service. And I'm proposing this. I mean, the NHS is a big aspect of current British politics. I've worked in it. I worked for 4 years in hospitals, both in Canada and Britain, as a nursing orderly. I know how hospitals work. I love them. But at the moment, there's far too much money going into them, and they're not curing people. They become industrial centres for medical diagnosis and last-minute intervention leading to death. You know, the hospital is the place you go to die in, not normally. Well, that's not what I want. I want a national healing service, not a national health service. I want a national healing service which puts much less emphasis on hospitals and much more on early intervention and prevention of illness, and much more community medicine and more alternative complementary medical paradigms being explored. I'm with David Tredinnick, who was the great MP for the Bosworth area, where some of my ancestors come from, who's pioneered, bless him, the idea of complementary and alternative medicine. He wants homeopathy, alternative healing and so on, mainstreamed. And I'm saying 100%. I think he should be an independent Remain MP, and we need people like him to transform our National Health Service into a National Healing Service. People exploring all kinds of things like naturopathy, homeopathy, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, herbalism, spiritual healing, people like Harry Edwards, who was a very great spiritual healer, the National Federation of Spiritual Healers. These are mainstream, alternative and complementary medical systems that work. They actually work, you know, I know that because I can vouch for it. Ayurvedic medicine, again, it works because they take account of the whole person. So they should be mainstreamed and part of the NHS's offerings as a National Healing Service. You can go to your clinic and you can say which one you want. And you can try this, you know, Ayurvedic thing for 3 months. If that doesn't cure you, you can try the Chinese, or you can try, you know, naturopathy or something else. And the people that are skilled in that would be doctors who are trained also in those systems. So I'm suggesting also the reform of medical training to take account of these spiritual alternative and complementary practices, because they work empirically. And we have to have, therefore, a paradigm shift in thinking. And this is part of the revolution I'm suggesting. What I'm talking about is a paradigm shift to the greening of our very, you know, the way we think of reality. The old style scientific revolution, which we have as the basis of our knowledge systems and our higher education systems, is outmoded. We need a new paradigm. Like Marianne Williamson is saying in the USA, I'm saying the same in the UK. And we need to take account of that new thought, as it's called, that how you think affects your health, how you visualize your cancer affects whether you're going to recover from it. You need to be taught meditation practice, visualization, etc. And the legalization of you know, medical interventions would be part of this. So anyway, that's the National Healing Service. The next thing I'm saying in the Alliance Reform Manifesto is that whistleblowers in all aspects of British society have to be protected by law. We've become a society that's afraid to speak out. We're in danger of becoming that. I always love Britain because we have courage, you know, and we're in danger of losing that badge of courage. The most important whistleblowers have to be protected by law, and we should also protect those who come from abroad, people like Assange. You know, this guy shouldn't have been persecuted and hounded. He's told the truth about what the military machinery of America's been doing. He should be let out of prison in Belmarsh, given a knighthood. I'm sorry. And the Remain Reform Alliance would pledge to that. And whistleblowers generally, and I don't mean, you know, fake whistleblowers, I mean genuine ones. There should be a track whereby they can be protected. Okay, the other thing that I'm saying in this Remain manifesto, and it is quite hard hitting, I hope you'll appreciate it, is that lawyers should have to tell the truth as well. I've said parliamentarians have to, and well, lawyers do too. There's no ability or wiggle room to lie in court anymore. Lawyers cannot lie, and if they're found to have lied, the case is lost, they're sacked. The client can get a new lawyer. There has to be a really tightly policed standard for lawyer training. They have to study philosophy of law. They have to read their Kant. They have to do their essays on the duty of truth. They have to read their Bentham. They have to read Beccaria, who outlawed torture. We have to become a people on this planet who tell the truth naturally and automatically, who want to tell the truth and who wouldn't even think of lying to advance their personal interest. Or anyone else's. So lawyers can't lie. Point number 21. Point number 22, that goes up to and includes Parliament. So the Attorney Generals, the legal officers, cannot hide behind this fig leaf of legal confidentiality. We saw that with this Tory Attorney General, again and again being asked point blank, what's he doing about blah, blah, blah. He kept saying, I can't answer because of legal immunity. Sorry, that's countermanded by the reform legislation that's brought in, that they have to answer truthfully in Parliament. And there can't be this sheltering behind sub judice. Parliamentary duty of truth-telling comes ahead of legal duty to say nothing and be quiet and secretive and sneaky. That's what lawyers do. No, sorry, time to reform the legal profession. From now on, you have to tell the truth. All the way up to Parliament, there's no hiding behind this sub judice rule anymore. And also, parliamentary protocol, any UK citizen can write to any parliamentarian in any party, from any part of the country, and expect a decent answer. This thing that you can only ask your MP in your local area, no, that's ridiculous. Scrap that protocol, because we're now a global international community. I might be living at Fintorn, I may have much more in common with Caroline Lucas in Sussex, who's the MP of Brighton. I might want to tell her about a problem that I think she's got the brains to understand and do something about. My local MP might be a Tory who's a complete got half a working brain cell, So I should have the legal right to write to any MP I want. And they should have the legal duty to reply back to me. And if they don't have enough staff, give them more staff. It's called communication revolution. What I'm suggesting is just common sense. If I'm in America and I want to write to a senator in California because he's actually able to understand what I'm talking about, let's say Marianne Williamson gets elected as governor of California 10 years from now, I want to write to her, not some redneck in Texas that still thinks we should have hanging and bring back the death penalty, some redneck Republican. No. So you can write to whoever's the most appropriate for your case. And it may not be where you live. So that's a reform that's long, long overdue. Now when it comes to foreign policy, again, total overhaul of UK foreign policy, the Remain Alliance would have to say, okay guys, we're rethinking UK foreign policy. We've made some mistakes recently. Let's just rewind to 9/11. Probably Tony Blair made a mistake by not challenging the interpretation of Bush, going into the Iraq War, making us mortal enemies throughout the Middle East, losing the last bit of credibility we had as a nation, blah, blah, blah. So let's go back. Let's reform UK foreign policy and let's democratise it, green it, and do what the Lib Dems did then, and the Greens, by utterly opposing that invasion of Iraq in 2013. In 2003, following 2001. I mean, I was there marching in London along with 1 million or 2 million other Londoners and British subjects who said no invasion of Iraq, and we were totally ignored by the then Labour Party, of all things. Well, transform the UK foreign policy. What would that mean in practice? Well, it would mean that we don't always do what the USA says immediately. We don't sort of regard ourselves as a little colony of the USA. we treat other nations like the USA and Russia and elsewhere as our interest is to help peace, advance the peace process, right? So we reorientate our foreign policy to a peace policy. Now, I've set up the only research institute for peace policy that yet exists on the planet. Nobody's even thought about having a policy for peace. People think about military policy, foreign policy, security policy, defense policy, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying let's have a peace policy, guys. And everyone's welcome to the table. So USA, fine, but sorry, we're not going to join you on your military escapades anymore. No, next time you want to bomb some country somewhere, we're not joining in. And we're not going to sell weapons to you, Saudis, anymore. We love you, we love Islam, but we would love it if you would just make peace with the Yemenis and stop bombing these Shias and just realise that, you know, Islam will be much better served if you get all the top-ranking Shia and all the top-ranking Sunni scholars together. They sign a peace pact in Jerusalem, Al-Quds, they all do prayers together at the Holy Mountain. You know, what's wrong with that? So that's why I've set up a Shia-Sunni reconciliation task force. So foreign policy of the UK becomes totally changed. Instead of joining in these wars, like in Syria, we're going to back the al-Nusra Front against Assad. No, we're not. We're going to be strictly neutral. We're going to offer to mediate them. We're going to work with our Russian and American allies to try and get a proper mediation through UN channels. We're on the Security Council. We have duties as a country to ensure that peace prevails throughout the world. Our foreign policy has been hijacked by bellicose ignoranti, is the only way I can describe it. I used to go to meetings in the Foreign Office, King's Charles Street. I know it well, but it's become hijacked. I mean, I think the last really good UK Foreign Office person was Robin Cook, and he talked about an ethical foreign policy. I say resurrect Robin Cook, bring him back. Let's have an ethical peace foreign policy. And okay, so what does that mean? Well, on the matter of Russia, what do? Well, we try and mediate the problems between Russia and Ukraine. We try and mediate that Ukraine tragedy, that civil war that's broken out. I'm listening to the impeachment process of Trump, and it's very interesting that it's all about Ukraine, and I'm going to say something about that in a minute. But I think what's very revealing about the discussions they're having in the Security Intelligence Committee in US Congress is that they're fallen into this kind of militaristic view of Ukraine, and they keep talking about Russia as the enemy. Russia is the enemy, you know, we need to work with Ukraine against Russia and so on. That is not in Britain's foreign policy interests. What we want is peace, and we should be trumpeting that. If we're going to get rid of our nuclear weapons, right, which we are, by referendum, we have to ensure a world of peace. Then it's safe to do so, right? If we denuclearise, like Scotland's going to do, and everyone else has kept theirs, and the world is falling apart, and Russia and Ukraine and America are all throwing bombs at each other, it's going to be a very dangerous world. So it's in our foreign policy interest to seriously promote and canvass for and research and implement peace thinking in Ukraine. We should do it with our European Union hat on, through the European Union Mediation Service. The European Union should be neutral in relation to civil wars like Ukraine, and elsewhere, Syria, Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, Libya, you know, all around the Mediterranean. The European Union should be trying to work for genuine mediation and stabilisation of these countries so that massive refugees and stuff aren't happening. And we can then help as the European Union, including Britain, in rebuilding these shattered nations like poor old Libya. You know, it's very easy to bomb countries from a height. It's much more difficult to rebuild them. And yes, Gaddafi wasn't, you know, the greatest of all Muslims, but he wasn't anywhere as bad as the fanatics that swarm into his shadow. He was a clear thinking Islamic thinker who realised that true Islam is based on justice and truth. and it was wrong to do what we did. We should have mediated the Libya problem. When there was a civil war brewing, we should have immediately offered peace work. That's what I'm saying, a reorientation of our peace policy. Okay, so we should also, this is another issue for the reform process, I'm saying the state pensions in the UK are abysmal. Like, Britain is supposed to be a wealthy country, and yet we give our pensioners half of what they get in France and a quarter of what they get in Germany. I mean, it's scandalous. Those countries aren't that much wealthier than us. I mean, so I'm saying Reform Alliance should immediately say, on the day they come into power, double the pension immediately from 8 grand to 16 grand a year or whatever it is. You know, it's a pathetic amount. So double it. It would still be less than France and Germany. Simple, straightforward, and make, stop this sort of mean way of preventing women from getting it. There's all this nonsense about women who are born in the wrong year can't get it. Well, sorry, just be generous. The legalisation of soft drugs, again, it's a policy in the Remain Alliance. It's there as Lib Dem policy. It's there as Green Party policy. It's common sense. It's what they've done in Canada. Soft drugs are part of life's pleasures and mystery, and people should be able to explore these things just as they can alcohol or tobacco or whatever. I mean, it wouldn't lead to mass, outbreaks of overuse. In fact, it has the opposite effect. When it loses the glamour of being illegal, then people will do it judiciously when it suits their own evolutionary process and so on. And it would also bring in huge amounts of money to the tax system if every joint you bought in a off license for, that kind of thing was half of it went to the Treasury or something. I think it's just a common sense idea, and I'm speaking as a Canadian citizen. Dear old Justin Trudeau had the courage to do this, and it's working in Canada. Let's just do it. It's obvious. On Northern Ireland, again, everything I've been saying, I strongly hope that Northern Ireland would choose to stay in the UK if we do all these progressive things, if we implement what I'm suggesting. Otherwise, if these Tories get elected and the madness they represent, well, then Northern Ireland is going to be leaving and joining the South. It's going to be, they'll be having their second referendum under the Good Friday Agreement, and the only way they can keep Northern Ireland and the Republic border free is if the North joins the South. There's no other way of squaring the circle. Or we all stay together in the European Union. Now, some of the Protestant DUP and other loyalist MPs have finally realised that Brexit means the breakup of Britain and the breakup of Ireland out of Britain. They've realised that they've been led by, a demonic force, actually, has taken over the Tory party, and which is, all it knows how to do is lie in the interests of the self-serving oligarchy that are ruling it and that have hijacked it. If you're a true loyalist and you believe in the UK, then you must vote to oppose Brexit and to have a second referendum. And I believe that Northern Ireland would opt to stay in the European Union in the second referendum, which would be nationwide. But I also think it's touch and go whether they would want to join the South or want to stay in the UK. And to be honest, if we all stay in the European Union, which I'm hoping and praying, it doesn't matter really. I think there's an argument for both ways. I mean, I love Ulster. I do chair this Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Britain and Ireland, and I'd be happy either way, whatever they vote for. Sinn Féin, I admire their courage. I understand why they don't go to Westminster. It's so corrupt, it's not surprising. But I think they're wrong. I think Sinn Féin should come to Westminster. They are elected MPs, they get a salary, they get staff. I think they should turn up, and I think I've even